At the age of 18, I remember getting a scholarship to study at the university in one of the countries in Europe. And I remember I was very young. I had not really made such big decisions in my life, or risk actually. And I remember traveling alone from Kenya to Europe. I did not know what life had for me in store for me. I did not know who I was going to meet. Basically, I just knew that I'm going to study. And if I say that was the biggest risk or decision I've ever taken in my life, it's literally the biggest decision I ever done. And I remember arriving, and I could immediately feel the difference. The difference was felt immediately when I arrived. Imagine living in a country where you don't see anybody that you recognize. You know very well that you have no relative in that country. You don't know where you're going to stay. You don't know who you're going to meet, how your life is going to be, and the weather. I remember I arrived during December, which was during winter, and it was very, very cold. So there's the immediate loneliness that you feel because you don't have even anybody that to say hi to or tell anybody that I've arrived or I'm at the airport, come pick me up. There's immediately the difference that you feel. But also, I knew that I was going to school, so I was not really worried that much. I knew that probably I'll have a good life living at the university. I remember I was in the taxi from the airport going to the school hostels, and for almost about 30 minutes, looking through the window, I don't see somebody that I recognize. I don't see somebody with the same skin texture as mine or skin color as mine. And I'm like, how is life going to be in this country? Who am I going to approach if I have a problem? And the feeling of, I don't know how to put it, almost like you are the odd one out. Almost like you're not at the right place, actually. The kind of feeling. And yeah, like I said earlier, there's the loneliness that you feel. But it was the beginning of my life in Europe. So I can't say that I was feeling as much lonely as I felt after a couple of years. But you almost feel the difference, actually, because you know you're a place where you're alone. You don't have a relative around. You don't have parents around. You don't have any friend that you know. You're probably going to have to make friends. And yeah, actually, that was at the beginning of one of the toughest life I ever had to live. I've had to endure. It wasn't like tough as in torture, but having to cope with the situation, having to develop ways in order to live in this new environment that I was in. And talking about this topic specifically, you could almost feel like if you walk around, or you go to the shop, or you go in the bus, you almost feel like people are asking themselves, why are you here? You almost feel like you're being judged by people just being around, because everybody's looking at you. If you pass people, you can hear people laughing in the background, and you ask yourself, what are they laughing about? What is? Because this is not something I had experienced earlier back at home, and it was new for me. But I think the worst part is that I was very young, so all these things were hitting me like, and I could feel the judgment that was made by people. Every place I went, I could feel the judgment. I could feel people talking behind my back, because people are not like talking to me, hearing them, but I could just feel like somebody talking. You pass teenagers, it's mostly teenagers. You pass teenagers, then you hear them, they laugh, or you are at the bus stop, people see people pointing at you, then laughing, then you're like, what are these people laughing about? But considering the topic that the fact that I was different in terms of my skin texture, I could possibly guess what they are laughing about. I could possibly get an idea of what they thought was funny. But to me, it raised a lot of questions, because the question was why do people act like that? But again, everything was new to me, so it was a shock, because it's not something I'd experienced earlier, coming from Africa, where life is pretty simple, and everybody, friends, your parents are just around the corner, your relatives are around the corner, so you don't really have the feeling of separation, the feeling of being alone. And another thing is, I remember getting in the bus. You enter in the bus, you sit. The bus is full, but nobody sits around you. Everybody just stand. Every seat is taken except the one that you are next to you. But the people standing just because I don't know if they don't want to sit around me or just them opting to standing, which I don't know. But I assume most of them are like the decision of most females. Females is very rare for female. At the beginning, it was very rare for a female to come and sit next to me. Most of the time, it was guys. I realized that most of the guys don't really mind much. They don't really care. They just mind their business. But women, I think most of the judgment came from women. You get in the bus, women staring at you. You go outside, women staring at you, which was like, it was very uncomfortable. I remember sometimes I didn't even want to go out because of that. You go to the park, the same thing. Children's, teenagers laughing when you pass. People looking at you, pointing at you, and you're like, man, you're living in the modern age where people still acting as if they've never seen a black person before. And still, the question was why? Why are people acting like this? Because I remember one time I entered in a bus. I was in a mall, like 30 minutes from where I lived, and there was this guy. It was 3 kids. They were just with their parents. They were following me, trying to record, and I felt like a little bit uncomfortable. And I was moving around trying to avoid them, but they followed me everywhere. I went to the bus. They were just behind me, pointing, laughing, recording, and I'm like, their parents are just sitting next to them. They're laughing together. I'm like, hey, man, this is probably one of the worst experience I have had to live in my entire life. But yeah, I guess it was a situation that was pretty much making me learn about life, making me understand what life is. Not as I was saying that people are helping me. It was a situation that was helping me understand that people are different, and it's not like everybody the same. No, I'd been used to the life of having people around, having friendly people around, but when you switch environment and you find that things are very different, and not different in the best way, but different in probably a bad way. Most of the things were good, but most of the things also new to me. So I wasn't necessarily bad, but because they were new, it felt like bad. Now I remember when I enrolled in class, I was an introvert. I think I'm not an introvert, but because I was new, I was a little bit quiet, not really talking much, and it was very difficult to make friends. It was very difficult to talk to other students. I could talk to people, but having to make friends and because people are used to come to class, when classes over, people go home. You don't know where they live, and you go back into your hostel, and you meet the next day, and it was very tough for me because I was a new country, and I expected that probably the friends I'm going to have is my classmates, but you clearly feel that it was the difficulty of to try to make friends for my own classmates. I was the only black student in our class. So sometimes the teacher automatically assumes. I remember this one teacher. Actually, it's a very fun situation. The teachers automatically assume that you don't know much, you don't understand in class, just simply because you're different. I remember having a very tough time getting used to that. I remember one time I did an exam and I did not pass, so I went to the office and said I needed more time to finish the exam. And I was given more time, but then the teacher was not very happy. And I remember I entered in class and she told me, Baraka, from now I will not mark your exam again. You go find another teacher to mark your exam again. And it was an embarrassment because it was a lecture, and there was almost like 200 students there, and I was just standing at the door wondering why. But I already knew that what she thought, because she thought probably I went to the office and spoke behind her back. But I felt the judgment, but I was trying to look for help because I was not understanding class at some point, But from that alone, it kind of like it already made me very sad and more introverted compared to the past, because now it's like I've been embarrassed just in front of everybody here, and the teachers are already judging me how I'm going to deal with this situation. And yeah, I would say being in university probably it was very difficult studying in university. And this is probably one of the experience or one of the difficult things I've ever had to deal with. But the worst part was that I was very young. So having to deal with these things at the age of 18, 19, I felt like crying, I felt like calling home and talking to my parents, things like that. But no, I was trying to be a guy, to be tough, and yeah, I think it worked to some point because I got used to it. But you never get used to the feeling of people talking behind your back and pointing at you and laughing. It is never a pleasant feeling, even if you experience it for 10 years, 15 years, not 1 year, 2 years. It's still never a good feeling because you ask yourself, what are they laughing about? I mean, what is so funny about me that people walk around and laugh and point? What is it exactly? So living in a place where you get judged by skin color, I mean, comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of negative things, because I think the biggest thing I have to deal with is feeling neglected and feeling lonely, because there's nobody there to stand for you. There's nobody to tell you, hey man, this is normal, things gonna be okay. When you experience this thing, you go out, you experience this thing, you just come back home to your room and you sleep and wake up the next day, hope things are going to be different, and then things they don't become different the next day. Something different happens, and then now it's another stressful day. You're like, oh, maybe tomorrow things could be okay. And you can call home and try to explain, but again, it's not really that much of a big deal because you're still here alone. The routine, once you experience these things, now you can try to avoid this environment of where people judge you, and then when you try to avoid this environment, then you find yourself being at home all the time, and then now you get bored, you don't have friends, and then you can't have somebody to talk to, and it becomes this stressful situation, very stressful, because you have one routine: going to the shop, coming back to your room, going to church, or you're only going somewhere you're not familiar with, or you don't want to go places where there are people because you're afraid that the same thing is going to happen. And I remember one time I was working in a park, and there was a father and a child. They were coming. They were like coming. I was going. They were coming, and this kid asked his father, "Who is that?" And the father said, "That's a nigger." And I was like, that's probably one of the worst things to have to teach your child, and at that kind of age. And that is actually where I understood why most of the teenagers were acting like, hate this judgment all the time, because I think nobody really told them that it's not a good thing. Most of them grew up thinking that it's fine, that guy is black, or because most of the judgment I was getting was from teenagers. Actually, it's not really like from older people. Most of them, they just look at you and you can feel like, who's this? They're talking like, who's guy? What is this guy doing here? And you can just hear their thoughts. But the teenagers were the ones that were like showing their action, like pointing, laughing, and because I was also a teenager, I feel like, man, this people I expect to be friends with me, but then there's people who are like judging me, and then there's some people who are making me like feel like, hey, why am I here? But I was there to study, and I didn't want to leave my studies and go home. But I think the life has taught me to be tough, because having to experience these things. I don't wish it. I hope things are going to get better probably in the future. People who travel to Europe for the first time are going to have a good experience. But I'm not going to name this specific country, but I just hope people are going to get a better experience in the future. But in general, one thing that I learned about people who are trying to be racist, something like that, most of them is like, I think the only way to deal with this situation is to understand a person's intentions. Some people are doing it in order to like take revenge. Like if you do something and they feel bad or they get hurt, they just turn to being racist as a way of trying to hurt you. Some people are just, most of the time, probably they're intoxicated and drunk. Sometimes probably just like somebody's his friend and they're like, look at that guy, let's try to do this. It's like peer pressure. I think most of the people understand that it's wrong, but they still do it probably to get your reaction. I think it's mostly to get your reaction, or mostly like to, I don't really get it. The pointing thing and laughing, I don't know the intention of it. I think most people think it's funny. I don't know why they think it's funny, but most of the racists are just doing that in order to get that reaction from. They don't necessarily like know you very well, or And once you understand that, you understand their intentions, so it's kind of it's very easy for you to deal with the situation, because if you know somebody is trying to hurt you, all you have to do is just ignore them. If you know somebody is trying to get a reaction from you, all you have to do is, again, ignore them. And that is probably one of the way to deal with people like that. And having to use force or fight somebody is not really the best way, especially when you are in a foreign country, a place where it's not your country, you don't really know the laws, things like that. It's not really something I recommend on anybody to like fight or argue with people. Now, you may get hurt. I know some people who got hurt because they tried to fight and they ganged up and they got hurt. So it's not really something I recommend, fighting in a foreign country. No, don't. But I think things have changed as years went by. I got used to the situation, and you start seeing like things that are a little bit better from the past. Probably because at the first time, it was my first time, so I felt like they were much worse. But now I feel like nothing has changed, but I'm used to the situation, so life is a little bit easier. It's not that difficult. What ways? I don't know how we're going to change the situation of racism or judgment, things like that, being judged because of skin color. I think it's first the responsibility of parents trying to teach their children that, hey man, that is not good, don't do this, don't do that. And when people grow up, they grow up with this mindset that they're the same person as I am, and there's no reason for me judging them. And it's going to take a long time for that mindset to change. But 100 years from now, I think probably the topic of racism is going to be not that major as it is now. I hope things are going to change for the better. I hope people who are going to travel in the future are not going to face as much difficulties as I faced, because I had a very tough time. There's times I wish I would sit in my room and cry and things like that, but I couldn't really do anything about it. You can cry, but then tomorrow is another day, and you may face the worst also. So I had to deal with it and face the situation, and it's not something I wish on anybody. So yeah, educating. If you see a child that is acting a certain way, make sure you educate them, tell them, hey, this is not good. And I also feel like the one way that this topic of racism is not disappearing is because it keeps getting discussed over and over and over and over, and it still remains in people's minds. The topic never disappears, so it's people always, and because people know that it is something hurtful, so they keep repeating it in order to hurt somebody. Or you can see in sports, most fans, opposite fans, when they're losing, they try to turn to being racist and trying to hurt the other side. So it's not really. Other people use it as a way to hurt people. I think that's what people do, but. Education, educating our children and our youth is probably one of the best way to do this situation. And when we're trying to travel to foreign countries, this is something you may face in the future. It's something you may face in the future, or you may face when you arrive, or you may never face it at all, depending on where you are. But be prepared, and thank you for watching the video.